Welcome back to my channel, and today I'll be speaking to you about the layout of the CSEC math paper. So I'll be using the June 2023 math paper as an example. So let's speak of how question 1 may look. Question 1, in most times you get a fraction to solve, right? And just know that in fractions, right, boom dash, right, it still applies. So you know that you're going to work a multiplication first, right, and then you're going to add after, and then just do your subtraction part for this fraction here, right? And then here also for question 1 they have some approximations. So in this case you're going to find the square root of 1 minus cos 37 squared and run to 3 decimal places. So that's what we mean by approximation, right? And also for approximation you may get significant figures or standard form. All right, so those are the three main things. Standard forms, otherwise known as scientific notation, right? Significant figures, right? And run into decimal places along with the fraction, right? And you see this question also has standard form in it. You're supposed to write this into standard form. And now we also on question 1 have consumer arithmetic. Under consumer arithmetic, as you see, wages may come under consumer arithmetic, right? Because it's a wages question. Sometimes you may get tax, sometimes you may get discount, sometimes you may get higher purchase, sometimes you may get simple interest, compound interest, right? Basically topics under consumer arithmetic, right? Profit and loss, percentage profit and loss, and so on, right? So prepare yourself for those topics under consumer arithmetic. So that's basically what for question 1, consumer arithmetic, approximation, and fractions. So for question 2 now, right, you mostly get like algebra type questions, right? So in this case you have an algebra fractions, right, with indices, and then you solve this inequality, right? And basically and again you have a shape here where you're supposed to write it as an expression, right? So basically for question 2, right, it is basically algebra type questions, and sometimes they can put it in the form of a shape like this, right? And for question 3 now, right, this is where you would have like reflection questions on the transformation, right? So sometimes they may give you back shapes like this, right? But for question 3, right, the most important thing is basically transformations, like right here, right? The thing about this paper now, what they did, they let you draw the shapes. Normally most times they make you describe them, right? And sometimes they may tell you to draw it on the grid or so on and so forth. But this question just tells you that you're supposed to draw the shapes, right? So you're supposed to reflect it in the line x is equal to -1, and translation with the vector for -7, right? So this shape here. So basically what's different about this question from other years is that instead of giving a question to describe, they're making you draw it, right? But in most cases prepare to describe the rotations, right? And question 4 is basically functions, right? So where you have like f of x, right? So this is basically where you calculate for functions like this, right? So you know wherever you see x, you're going to substitute the values, right? Composite function combining 2 or more functions. So basically under functions you may get composite functions, inverse functions, right? Or just simply substitution. So prepare for that on question 4, right? And sometimes on question 4 too, they may give you like to write something in the form of y is equal to mx plus c, right? Like straight line graphs sometimes, right? Every year that comes on it, right? Like write an equation in the form of y is equal to mx plus c, right? So it comes every year, all right? Even if it's not like on question 4, it's just going to come. And in this case for question 5 we're going to have a question as statistics, right? This year for 2023 they did something different. Most time for statistics we use a cumulative frequency, right? A cumulative frequency, but instead they did a bar chart. So this just shows that prepare yourself for anything basically, right? Because we mostly do a cumulative frequency, but this time it was basically a bar chart and you answer questions from that. Now question 6 is always a measurement type question, right? So if you look right here, they gave us the sector of a circle, right? And they want us to find the perimeter, right? Basically after they turn the sector of the circle in the form of a cone, right? And what happens when the sector turns into a cone? The area of the sector, right, which the formula is theta over 360 times the perimeter of the sector, I should say, right, is going to become the circumference of the base of this cone here. So the formula for that is theta over 360 times 2 pi r. So whatever the perimeter of this sector is, it's going to be the perimeter of the cone, and the radius of the sector, right, it's just going to become the slant height right here. So basically that's what happens when a sector forms a cone, right? And also note, sometimes the most popular thing they do is to give you like cylinders, right? So sometimes they'll give you cylinders in form of a measurement until to find the volume, right? Sometimes it may be cuboids, right, and they tell you that it's either a tank or a cardboard box, right? So basically prepare yourself for anything on a measurement and circles and so on and so forth. So now let us look at something else. Number 7, question 7, right? Most cases too is patterns and sequences, right? So basically you're finding the pattern, how much it is going up by, right? For this, just observe the pattern, right? And then you do design 4, right? And also you're required to fill out a table like this. So question 7 is mostly like patterns and sequences, right? Question 8 is back to functions, but we call it algebra, relation, functions, and graphs. So this is where we're required to do graphing, right? And most times it's a quadratic equation. So to find these values, we basically just substitute the x values, right, to find the y's down here, right? So if you wanted to find the y value for -3, you just substitute -3 into the function, right? Negative x squared plus x plus 7, and then you'd get the value for y, and then you do the same for the other ones, right? And then now you're going to plot your points on the graph, and then just after you plot the points, you're going to just sketch it by hand, right? As parabolas, to draw a parabola, right, you do not use a ruler, you just draw by hand, right? So yes, so basically that's it. You most likely get a quadratic function for question 8, right? And sometimes they may ask you the maximum and the minimum point of the graph, right? And also the equation of the axis of symmetry, that's where the that's basically the line which where the line cuts the parabola in half, right? So that would be x is equal to something, right? So now if we want to find the solutions to the graph, right, also it's basically if you realize you have two x values, right, x is equal to something and x is equal to something, that's where the parabola touches the x-axis, and the parabola will touch the x-axis at 2 points. All right, and for this one, as stated, we'll always get something with y is equal to mx plus c, right, with like straight line graphs. So basically we need to prepare for like this, right? So if you want to find like the gradient of the line, then you would use the formula of y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. All right, so basically on the functions part, it's most likely you're going to get you're going to get a quadratic function, right, where a parabola is involved, right? And also you're going to you sometimes may get what's I going to say again, right, you sometimes may get you may have to write it in the form of y is equal to mx plus c, like the equation of a straight line, right? So a straight line graph, otherwise known as a linear function, right? So now let's look at question 9. Question 9 is geometry and trigonometry. So for geometry, you always have for circles, always have a question pertaining to circle theorem, right? And you need to remember the rules, like angles in a semicircle. The angle in a semicircle adds up to 90. The angle at the center, right, is twice the angle at the circumference, or the angle at the circumference right here, right, is half the angle at the center, right? Now to know that the angle between the tangent and the radius is 90 degrees, and and opposite angles in a cyclic quadrilateral add up to 180, and so on and so forth, right? And also basically too, not only theorems, things like angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees, and basic geometric rules, right? So the circle theorem is more thing you have to visualize, all right? And also you need to work out the angles, and you have to give a reason, all right? So your reason could be from one of the theorems, or angles in a triangle add up to 180, and so on. And also the trigonometry part, you can get a question on bearing like this, right? Bearings here, if you're required to like use the sign, and sometimes you get something on like the Pythagorean theorem, right? Prepare for something on either the Pythagorean theorem, a question involving that, right? You may have to use one of the trig ratio SOHCAHTOA. So use the Pythagorean theorem and SOHCAHTOA only when you're using a right angle triangle. In this case, you're not using any right angle triangle, right? So you're going to use either the sine or the cosine rule, right? And for those, we get those on the formula sheet, which is always provided for you, right? And the last thing is vectors and matrices. You can get it on for matrices, right? You can get it on matrix transformations like this, right? And also you could either get it on multiplying matrices, adding matrices, subtracting matrices, equal matrices, inverse matrices, matrices with simultaneous equations. So basically prepare for that under the topic of matrices, right? All right, so now under vectors now, right? For vectors, what you can do is to prepare to probably add vectors, right? And for vectors, just remember you cannot go straight like to AC, right? Let's say if you have a triangle OAB and you want to go to AB, you have to go from A to O and O to B, right? And whenever you're going against the arrow, then your sign is going to change. So like, let's say for example, if OA is 2A, right? And if you're going to AO, it's going to become negative 2A because you're going against the arrow, right? So vectors, right? You can also prepare for like collinear vectors, right? Parallel vectors, right? What else for vectors? Graphing vectors, because it's another thing, right? And basically with vectors, the main thing is you have to know ratios, right? Because ratios is a thing which comes in vectors too, right? And basically algebra as well, because vectors has a mixture of like ratios and algebra, right? So basically that you also need to know that direction matters. So if you're going with the arrows, your sign will stay the same, right? So if the sign was negative, so let's say for example OA was 2A, if you're going with the arrow, it's same at 2A, right? But let's say for example if you're going to AO, which is against the arrow, it will become negative 2A. all right, so the main important things to remember for vectors is like directions, ratios, how to work with like algebra as well, and how to graph them, right? How to find the length of a vector, right? And such. All right, so basically that would be it for the paper. This is what you're supposed to expect for your exam. All right, I hope this was helpful to you, and remember to like, share and subscribe, and I will see you next time.